$1,000. That's not a balance. That's a decision. One wrong move and it's $340. One right move and it's the first brick in something that takes a decade to name. You are 30 years old. You have exactly $1,000 and the uncomfortable awareness that you should probably have more by now. You don't. Most people don't. They just don't say it out loud. They post the vacation and delete the bank notification. They split the dinner bill on 3 different cards and hope nobody notices. You notice. You notice because you're doing the same thing. This is not a story about getting rich. This is a story about what $1,000 actually means when you're 30 and you finally decide to stop pretending it's a temporary situation. At 30, the math changes, not the arithmetic, the weight of it. At 23, broke feels like a phase. At 30, it starts feeling like a pattern. And patterns are harder to argue with than circumstances. You can't blame the economy forever. You can't blame the entry-level salary forever. At some point, the variable in the equation is you. That's not an accusation. That's the most useful thing anyone will say to you in this entire decade. So you have $1,000. Here's what most people do with it. They protect it emotionally, not financially. They move it to a savings account and feel responsible. They leave it there untouched for 4 months as proof of self-control. Then, the car registration comes due, and it's gone, not wasted, gone. And they start again from zero with a quiet, low-grade shame that never quite announces itself but lives underneath everything. This is the cycle. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just the same loop running on a slightly different schedule every year. Here is what the $1,000 is actually telling you. It's telling you that you've survived. You got here. You kept something. Now the question is whether you keep surviving or you start building. Those are different activities. They require different decisions. And the first decision is this. You have to stop treating $1,000 like it's fragile. Money sitting still is money that is losing. Slowly, quietly, invisibly, but losing. Inflation is not a news story. At 30, inflation is a personal experience. The rent you could have locked in at 27 looks different now. The coffee that was 3.40 cents is 5.20 now, and you adjusted without noticing. Your $1,000 is worth less than it was last January, and it will be worth less next January. This is not pessimism. This is the operating environment. You need to know what field you're playing on. So what do you do with $1,000 when you're 30 and you finally understand that letting it sit is its own kind of decision? First thing, you separate it, not all of it. $300 stays liquid. That's your buffer, not your emergency fund, your buffer. Your emergency fund comes later when you have more runway. Right now, the buffer is what keeps a flat tire from becoming a credit card balance. The buffer is what keeps you from making a panic decision with the rest of it. $300 liquid. Don't touch it. Don't move it. Don't count it as money you have for anything else. That leaves $700. This is where 30-year-olds either make the most important financial decision they've made so far, or they lose the $700 to a feeling. The feeling is urgency. It disguises itself as opportunity. A friend's startup. A crypto play that's already up 40%. A course that promises to change everything for 4 installments of $197. The feeling is real. The opportunity usually isn't. Not because those things are always wrong. Because your $700 is not risk capital. Not yet. Risk capital is what you deploy when losing it doesn't change your behavior. $700 at 30 with $1,000 total to your name is not risk capital. It is the foundation of your next move. And you only get to make the next move if you don't gamble this one. So what do you actually do with the $700? You open a brokerage account if you don't have one. Not because you're going to become a trader. Because you need to start understanding what it feels like to have money in the market. You put $500 in. You buy an index fund. You don't pick stocks. You don't watch the ticker. You put $500 into something that mirrors the broad market, and you leave it there. You are not trying to win. You are trying to start. There is a version of you at 40 that will either have the habit of investing or the habit of planning to invest. Those are not the same person. The remaining $200, you spend it on your earning power, not your comfort. This is a specific, deliberate choice that most people skip because the return on it is invisible for 12 to 18 months. A book that takes you 6 weeks to finish and costs $18. A course directly related to a skill that someone will pay you more for. A tool that eliminates 4 hours of work per week. Not motivational content. Not productivity aesthetics. Actual skill acquisition in an area where the market is paying more than it paid 5 years ago. This is the $200 that outperforms everything else in your account if you make it the right $200. Now here's the part nobody explains at 30. The $1,000 is not the problem, and it's not the solution. The $1,000 is a mirror. It shows you the gap between what you earn and what you keep. And at 30, if that gap is small or negative, the answer is not to become more disciplined with $1,000. The answer is to earn more. Discipline is not a financial strategy at this income level. It's a survival strategy. And survival is not the same as building. You need to look at your income with the same honesty you brought to your bank balance. What is it actually? After tax, after the subscriptions that come out automatically, after the things you agreed to pay for a year ago and forgot to cancel. What is the real number landing in your account each month? Now subtract your fixed costs, rent, utilities, minimum payments on any debt you're carrying. What's left is not discretionary income. It's your building material. And if your building material is $200 a month, you need to either reduce the fixed costs or increase the total income. Those are the only two levers. Everything else is a feeling. Here is something that will change how you think about your 30s if you let it. The compounding that everyone talks about applies to more than money. It applies to skills, to relationships, to reputation. Every year you spend becoming better at something the market actually values, you are compounding. Every year you spend at a ceiling that doesn't reward growth, you are losing that compounding to someone else who found a different environment. At 30, you still have time to choose the environment. At 40, the environment starts choosing you. So the $1,000 is not the story. The $1,000 is the beginning of the story. The story is, who are you in the next 10 years? And what decisions does that person make consistently, quietly, without applause? Because there is no applause at this level. Nobody is watching your Roth IRA grow. Nobody is proud of you for skipping the group dinner that would have cost $90 with tip and drinks. Nobody celebrates the month you kept your spending flat, while everyone around you seemed to be upgrading. The decisions that build the foundation are invisible. That's what makes them hard. That's also what makes them powerful, because most people need the feeling of progress to keep moving. You are learning to move without the feeling. That is not a small thing. At 30, debt is the conversation underneath every other conversation about money. If you have student loans, a car payment, credit card balances, the $1,000 is not operating in isolation. It is operating against a negative number, and the negative number has an interest rate, which means every day you don't attack the debt is attacking you, not aggressively, quietly. $40 here, $70 there. The kind of bleeding that doesn't feel like an emergency, so it never becomes a priority. Until you run the numbers and realize you've paid $3,200 in interest this year on balances you've been carrying for 3 years and you have almost nothing to show for it. The $1,000 doesn't fix that. But the habit of the $1,000 does. The habit is this. Every month, something moves in the right direction because of a deliberate decision you made. Some months, it's the debt. You put an extra $200 at the principal of the highest interest balance, and you screenshot the new number even though nobody would understand why that screenshot means what it means. Some months, it's the investment account. $100 goes in, and you don't touch it. The habit is the point, not the amount. The amount grows. The habit has to already exist before the amount shows up. There is a version of this story where you get a raise at 32. A real one, $15,000 more per year. Before tax, it sounds significant. After tax, it lands as roughly $900 extra per month. The people who have the habit spend it on better versions of what they already had. The people without the habit spend it before they can decide what to do with it. Lifestyle inflation is not a moral failure. It's the default setting. Changing the default requires that you have already practiced changing it before the money arrives. You practice with $1,000. You practice when the number is too small to feel important. That's the whole point of practicing. You are 30. You have $1,000. Here is the truth that the financial content industry rarely says clearly. You are not behind. You are at a starting point that has produced people at every level of wealth that exists. The starting point is not the determining factor. The next 10 years of consistent, unglamorous, unannounced decisions are the determining factor. And the only version of you that makes those decisions is the version that stops waiting to feel ready, stops waiting to have more information, stops waiting for the plan to feel complete. The plan is never complete. The market is never perfectly timed. The emergency fund is never the right size. The debt is never the right amount to start investing. These are all reasons that feel real and function as delays. And delays compound the same way interest compounds. They accumulate quietly and then one day you're 38, and the gap between where you are and where you meant to be is large enough to feel personal. You close the gap the same way it opened, incrementally, without drama. $300 stays liquid, $500 goes into the market, $200 goes into your earning power, and every month after that, something moves in the right direction because you decided it would. That's the whole system. Not complicated, not exciting, not the thing that gets shared or talked about at dinner or turned into a 3-part documentary. Just a set of decisions made consistently by someone who stopped waiting for the feeling and started trusting the direction. The balance is $1,000. What you do with it in the next 90 days will not change your life. What you do with it in the next 10 years will make you unrecognizable to the person standing in the grocery store right now, putting the good coffee back, doing the math, waiting for something to change. Nothing changes until you decide that the $1,000 is not what you're working with, it's what you're working from. Start there.